the delay. I had some internet issues, and so anyway, I'm going to be using my cell phone and not using my video on. But I will share the screen and so 1 second. Um, yeah. So what we can do is very quickly look up some aspects. Today, I think Yukti may have told you that we have a comparatively short class, uh, and I will take a 1 hour session with you all so that you can look at some of these aspects and focus on the rest. So what we are going to do is, I'm sorry for this, is to be looking at the third session of what we have, which is reading and reflecting on text. And we're going to look at writing to some extent, but also writing in a sense that I have asked you some of the questions, which was one in the poll. Can you hear me, all of you? I won't be able to do the checking of the chats and this. Yeah. If people are not able to hear, someone will have to take the initiative and kind of, negotiate it for me, because I won't be able to hear what you are saying. Okay. You have, to some extent, already looked at the polls, and I will look at them a bit later also. Okay, we'll wait for some more to join since there are people doing that. Okay. 11 people have joined. I'll wait for 2 more minutes. Can you just let everyone know? Sorry.
Ma'am, could
Yeah.
you please clarify the assignment what you have put on Google Classroom?
Yes, definitely. Yes, sure. That's another thing that we can do. And yes, you should ask those questions for sure. Yes. I think some of you are still answering some of the questions on the poll. We'll also wait for that. I think it should take care of all the disturbances that I have in the class. Okay, I'm going to start sharing the screen again. And look at the questions that we had. So before that, I think one of the questions that was asked is, what do we do with the assignment? And very simply put, we can look at the assignment as, sorry, I don't know what to do about that. So I'm going to go into the assignment and check. Where is my classroom? Hetal, wasn't it, who asked me that question anyway? So let's look at session 2. Yeah. And let's look at this, identify the 5 types of biases. So what you are expected to do in this assignment is to be able to identify, go on Wikipedia, go on Google, and check out 5 different types of biases. So even if you do a very basic elementary search on biases, right? And if you type types, that's all right? And you have all these kinds of biases that will crop up at you. I don't mind whatever one you use, but the fact is that there are many, many types of biases that psychology will say. Some you would have already studied in psychology and learning, etc., where you were looking at cognitive bias, and where you're looking at halo effect, or you're looking at where you have prejudice, and you have a prejudice for something and prejudice against something, where it may be an attitude, where it may be the closed mind, where you think you know it all. So there are different kinds of biases that occur. There is attentional bias, there is attribution in a sense. So there are many, many different types of biases that you could have. If you have done any kind of preparation, you would have these kinds of erroneous understanding of what someone is trying to do. And so biases are primarily something that we would have because we are rooted in our religion, or we are rooted in a herd mentality, for instance, or loss aversion, whatever it is, right? Now, if you look at those examples, and there may be already something that you have studied in other subjects, if you can bring any five of them, one of the ones that I did discuss with you was confirmation bias. The confirmation bias primarily is something where, for instance, what we were doing with the lockdown effect is you have one sample which says lockdown has been extended for 2 whole weeks. This will affect the economy, but it is a necessary step. A similar information is given in piece 2, right? Lockdown has been extended for 2 whole weeks. The economy will take a long time to revive, difficult times ahead. Now, this can be misinterpreted, and this was something that even I think Rebecca and Shion in all last class had a question. That doesn't mean that it will always be misinterpreted. No. Confirmation bias from a reader's perspective will be where I read it and I look at it and say, hey, this article is telling me that it is difficult because I don't like lockdown. And this is the article that is to be trusted. And so I keep quoting this, I cite it, I share it on different kinds of WhatsApp media, etc. And so both are actually not commenting on the lockdown, but one of them seems to imply that it is negative. And so I take that and I say the author agrees with me, and this is a good author, and I somehow take and believe that this article is the right article and it is more validated. And all that I'm using as a validation yardstick is the fact that I have confirmation bias out there. One of the other things that you can look at is I will share a video that is used in terms of fake news, and it basically is someone who is just very quickly sharing WhatsApp forwards. And then, his daughter says, oh, how do you know that we should take bath in this manner? And he's like, oh, very famous doctor told me. And she says, so who is the doctor? And he's like, oh, you know that he's good, great doctor. And he's like, the doctor says he's a great doctor. So it's a circular reasoning, right? Like when parents are asking you to do something, and this is the first kind of circular reasoning that we learn, is that when parents ask you to do something and you're like, why? What's the answer that most parents give us? That's a question for you all.
Because I said so.
Right? It is like, I know, I heard it. Thank you. I'm asking you why you said so, but we don't dare ask that question, right? We are like, okay, and you know that now there's going to be no dialogue, and that's circular reasoning. And so there are two ways, and what is easier for you perhaps to do is to be aware of what you are producing in your writing that is confirming your bias. But I think we are all adult enough to know that. We are adult enough to know that what we speak and what we write is rooted in our biases and is rooted in our prejudice and is rooted in our own limited experiences and knowledge of a situation. So we know that. But the question here comes from, what is the reading bias? And the reading bias is, I will take sample 1. I don't like it because I feel very bad about lockdown. I don't like this article because this article is extremely neutral about lockdown and seems to even imply that the lockdown is good for us because it says, but it is necessary. I like the second article, which also actually doesn't say anything really about the lockdown. It is just presenting facts to a large extent, and it's just saying difficult times ahead, but it doesn't say whether it is difficult because of the lockdown or because of coronavirus and the need for the lockdown. But I read it and I'm like, yeah, the article, I totally agree. So how do I misinterpret information that is presented? Why is it that I'm more attracted to a particular kind of news? So to go back to Hetal's question, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to do something like what I have given at the bottom of the sample 1, sample 2. So you identify a bias, confirmation bias in this case. You explain that a confirmation bias is something where I, as a reader, will try and find articles that attract me or that confirm to my belief, right? And I will look at sample 2 and I say lockdown has been extended for 2 whole weeks. The economy will take a long time to revive, difficult times ahead. So this is an example taken. And then I say that the reader with a confirmation bias and a negative attitude towards lockdown is very likely to look at Article 2 and think that it agrees with his or her point of view. And selective reading is what arises from the confirmation bias. While the article does not itself say that it is bad, lockdown is bad, the person may be tempted to misinterpret and read it to think that the article agrees that the confirmation is bad. I mean, the lockdown is bad. So you are supposed to give 5 such examples. You don't have to give sample 1. You just have to give sample 2. And you have to explain sample 2 as to how will it, arise to confirmation bias. Does this help you understand the assignment better? Isa, you're clear?
Yes,
It's not
ma'am.
a very, it's not a
Yes,
very
ma'am.
long article, but it's not a very long assignment, but it expects you to think a lot. And I have asked for current examples because there is a lot. In fact, if you go online and you search biases and biased reading and biased, not reporting, because reporting is again a writer and a speaker's point of view, but biased reading, biased interpretation, and you go online, Trump, BJP, Congress, Modi, everything, everyone has 1,500 things about these confirmation biases and other kinds of biases like circular reasoning and, herd mentality, where everyone agrees with this. How can you not agree with it kind of sort? Where the way that they try and do that is by making you believe in statistics. So you look at it and say that the statistics say this, everyone is saying this. So I will believe the herd and I will therefore go with whatever the majority believes. It's very well used in very many places. Marketing uses this a lot because I can make you believe, if I give you percentage, if you go to Amazon and you see that it has a 4.5 star rating out of 5, and you're like, wow, great. But they give you this tiny number right next to it, which tells you how many voted. And sometimes the number of people who would have voted would have been like 4. And you're like, 4 people looked at this product and gave it a 4.5 out of 5 rating. I don't know whether I should buy it. Let me look for something else. And then you come across a similar product which has 18,000 people who have voted for it, but it has 3 star. Now, which one would you buy? The one with 4.5 star or the one with 3 star? That's a question also. I should do all these as polls. Would you buy the, are people typing?
3-star one.
Right. Many of you have said 3 star. Some of you have said 4.5 star. Interesting. So the point is not whether one is good or the other is bad. The point is that as an article, where is it that I look for? What is it that I look for? And typically, if I want to fool people, if people will go for the 4.5 star one, if I did not have that number right next to it. For me, I would just look at it and say, hey, statistical average 4.5 is so great. 4 people voted for it at 4.5. I'm sure of the 18,000, there would have been a far greater number of people who would have voted for that product at 5 star. And the reason it averages at 3 is because there were a number of people who also voted it for at 0. And so these are questions that you have to ask yourself and check to see whether it is confirming a bias, whether it's herd mentality, etc. So marketing uses herd mentality to try and lure you to certain products and pretend as if a lot of people have agreed upon it when they haven't really. So it's also herd mentality when you are agreeing with whatever, say, Amitabh Bachchan puts out, and and he says that everyone has said this. So you're like, oh, authority figure, and I like this authority. So whatever he says is great, and I have an authority figure bias, and I have a bias which is like, oh, everyone thinks like this, so then this must be true. So I don't really go and confirm and reconfirm and question and evaluate. So you will have to think through this. And I want you to think. I'm not expecting a perfect answer. I'll give you a chance to improve, but I want you to think and figure out these kinds of examples. 5 different types of biases. Okay. Okay, I'll come back to this. I won't do these. Okay, so some of this I won't do. Okay, what we are going to look at is multiple meanings, right? Now, one of the reasons, and today's session was this, it was reading and reflecting on text, but on primarily writing. Um, and so, uh, if you look at the most common words in Oxford Dictionary, like the most common 500 words, you will find that there are 28 separate meanings for them. For instance, you can look up the word run, or you can look up the word set. And, the sun sets, it means that it goes down. The batter is set, that means it actually rises up. The concrete is set, that means it has become hard. The color is, this is a matching set, that means it's a pair, and so on and so forth. You can look up the dictionary, it has like around 47 separate concrete meanings for it, and so similarly, you have this with fast. A person is fast when he can or she can run quickly. He or she is fast when they are restrained and they can't run at all. Colors are fast.
Should Papa આપણે major hotspot માં?
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So colors are fast if they do not run. One is fast if he moves in very suspect company, or this is fast if they are playing fast and loose. So it has so many different ways that you can use fast. Now, when we are writing, how do we want to use language, right? This is one of the questions that you would have. Moving from the kind of things that we were looking at, that was in our reading. How are we interpreting a word comes from our knowledge of that word. So, let's look at one of the words. Prepone. Is prepone a word? Prepone.
No. But it's used in
Indians
Indian
use it.
English.
Yeah. Right. And any Indian person will be able to tell you this word to the extent that it comes in official documents. But it is not really a word that Oxford English has yet recognized. It will get recognized, but it has not yet got recognized, right? So it's not an English, it's not a native English word. It is definitely not something that is accepted and used in other parts of the world. It is similarly another where you're like, I'll go to my native village. Um, mm, Native place is not again a word that anyone but Indians, actually Asians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and all of these people, other than these people, no one really uses it in the rest of the world. And these are kinds of understandings that you would have when you are reading these kinds of texts and producing it. So when you are writing, it is very important to understand, am I looking at the first meaning of this word? Am I looking at the second meaning of the word? Am I looking at a cultural knowledge of the word, etc., right? So in terms of writing and the words and the use and the choice of vocabulary, you will have to be conscious of it. This is actually building on what we did in the last class, but now it is going towards production. I am moving at a slightly faster pace than I would generally do in a face-to-face class, but I also think you can catch up. If you have doubts like you had, we can arrange other sessions for doubt solving and organize it. So I am going to move at a slightly faster pace to explain these concepts. Um, so you have something where you're misunderstood, right? I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize what you heard is not what I meant. And these are kinds of confusing codes that we know. I can leave this up for you, but it's one of my favorite quotes because I so often feel like telling people this. I know you think you understand, but that's not really what I meant. And that's not really what I said either. But they heard it in a particular way. And that is important in order to try and avoid misunderstandings, to understand how this can be done. Um, I'm not going to go through some of this because it was there. This was some of the exercises that we can look at and say how, and while listening and speaking is not really part of what our reflection and reading is, I believe a lot of us who are actually hear the words in our head. There are times when I read certain things and I speak them in a certain manner because I think of them in a certain manner because I have heard it in a certain manner. So we definitely orally hear something in our head, and so we know this means it. So we sound it out, right? So you can have an O the way you read it as if it's shock or pleasure. Oh, 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 oh. And like you can go on with this exercise, and I love doing it in my classes where I make students do it. I'm sorry, today I'm going to be faster in doing this, but you can practice it at home, and it is hilarious when you try it with kids, especially as they keep trying to use it in different ways. And also students who just don't, who are too shy, who don't like speaking too much. If you give it to them, they are so fascinated by saying, oh, I have to just say one word. That's all that you want me to say. Oh, I can do that. And then you're like, okay, now change the way that it is said. And these are the meanings you may want to express. And they try. So you can do this in terms of intonation, etc. Why is the listening and the speaking part important? As I said, because we kind of hear it in our head, and that's why it becomes important. I I know I'm doing a lot of poetry with y'all, but I find that poetry is one of the quicker ways to get to where we are trying to reach. I am going to do a longer extract with you, and I had that planned for the next hour, but we'll do it the next session, which is on Thursday. So, okay, now read this part. There is no story behind it. It's split like a second. It hinges around itself. Can you read it? Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So, what do you think it is? This one. I'll give you a minute to think through. Any guesses? There is no story behind it. It is split like a second. So, how can a
Time?
second be? Hmm. It hinges around itself. It has no future. It is pinned down to no past. It is a pun on the present.
Is it a
Time.
gossip?
Is it time?
Time. And what did you say?
A gossip?
Uh-huh. Uh, Now, when you see these pictures, can I engage you in this? There is no story behind it. It is split like a second. It hinges around itself like a doorknob, door with two sides actually. It has no future. It is pinned down to no past. It's a pun on the future. This is a poem called The Butterfly by Arun Kolatkar, right? And the reason I'm talking about this is a writing strategy, isn't it? It doesn't have to be written like a poem. The point is that this is how we try and create those kinds of quizzes. Who am I? What am I? Kind of quizzes that we make children play. I have three hands, and I am on the wall. What am I? And they have to guess that it is a clock or something. So these are kinds of things that it has. Um, and so he explains it. It's a little yellow butterfly. It takes the things. Now I'm going to go back and ask you this question. Uh, it's pinned down to no past. Why does he say that it is pinned down to no past? Why does he say there is no story behind it?
Because maybe the butterfly takes birth
Yes,
from
in
a
how he becomes a
caterpillar.
butterfly. So when he's initiating that past,
So, as both of you kind of said, yeah, from the caterpillar, it sort of merges into a butterfly. Yes. And so there is no story behind it. It has no future, is an interesting aspect as well. That may not be perhaps true. Or is it? So let's read the lines and just try and see what he's saying. There is no story behind it. It is split like a second. It hinges around itself. That's what it is. It is the doors, like the doors opening and closing around the body. It hinges. It is split like a second. It's so tiny, but it is split, isn't it? It is divided. It has no future. It is pinned down to no past. It is a pun on the present. It is a kind of double meaning on the present, as even within the line there is a present. So he talks of present as the present tense. And another word that what else can present mean?
A gift?
a gift.
Yeah. And it is a pun. So he's using a pun there. And it is a little yellow butterfly. It has taken these Richard hills under its wings. And that's also surprising because as an imagery, you're looking at it and saying, how does this tiny butterfly take hills under its wings? But it can, metaphorically, it can because it can fly that high up. Just a pinch of yellow. It opens before it closes, and it closes before it, oh, where is it? And so when he talks of there is no story behind it, it's like this sudden butterfly that just zoomed into his vision and zoomed out of the vision. And even that can mean that it has no future and no past, where he's like, I don't know anything about this creature that has zoomed in and zoomed out. Now, why am I doing this as a session? especially after the confirmation bias, the biases class. I didn't do confirmation bias with you all in that detail, but after the bias class, is when you read these to a certain extent, the way you think about, time, the way you think about certain words will make you predict a certain kind of action. And how important is it to predict when you are reading? That's again a question for you all. How important is it to predict when you are reading?
To understand it more better way.
Mm, so, yes and no. I will. Have you? Okay, wait. One second. If I type something of this sort here, what have I typed?
Butterfly.
And so, in the context, even though the spelling is wrong, you have got it. If I type the word in this and say read,
Maybe we are trying to connect it with our links, like whatever we have read past. When we are predicting, that means we are connecting the links with our past
absolutely.
experience.
Yes. And so it is based on, and a lot of the prediction game will be based on this. In fact, I will try and do a few exercises with you all for that also. But a lot of our prediction games are based on our past experiences. A lot of the prediction story, the way that stories and narratives and other aspects, the way understanding occurs is through prediction. So if you listen to a lot of children and when they are being told stories by parents, one of the very important tricks that parents will ask is to pause in between and ask the child, so what happened next? What do you think? And that child has to predict the next sequence. We are in a way training the child to predict, and that's very important. I think I sort of alluded to this in the first class, but I'll go back to this element. If you want to use something as okay, let's do this. I'm going to just come in with here. Keep this thought in mind. You were able to read this aspect of butterfly and read the passage to a large extent because you already knew that there are so many words with RAED, and this kind of combination must be read the passage. You will be able to read it. There's a Harvard study done on this, and it's a very famous WhatsApp forward that you are able to read because you're able to predict. So prediction is an extremely important trait. Now, why is that important? Because if you're talking about confirmation bias, if you're talking about writing for an audience, and if you're talking about reading another text, which is very different from how you generally think, you're going to find that reading very difficult simply because you don't think like that. And so you're not able to predict what happens next. So if you're reading romantic stories, you will be able to predict what happens next to a certain extent, and it goes fast. If you're trying to read a detective story, you cannot predict what happens next, and so you end up reading it slower. And again, a lot of studies have been done on this about reading speeds and how prediction enables you to go faster or slower, etc. That doesn't mean that reading for pleasure is a different aspect, or is the same as everything else. Now, I'm going to do something that I do with students of 6th and 8th standard grade, but I'm going to ask you to think through why we use it in that way. The opposite of literal language. Yes, yes.
So
Yes.
I have an example. So when we
Yes.
see small children, so when I take classes with small children of phonics, I see that when they learn phonics, they first read it slow and then gradually they read it through sight memory. So they start predicting what the word would be, and then they don't even need the phonics thing as they means after they know the phonics and they after gradually they don't need only it becomes a sight code for them unknowingly, and they start predicting the word and
Absolutely.
read it.
Absolutely. And so there are times when we actually, I know as students, we have done this all of us. We are very poor editors. We are very poor editors for a reason. We are very poor editors because we have taken each other's notes. I mean, all of us have some spelling mistake or the other, and we have auto corrected it for them because we are like, how is context mean? This must be what it means. So we autocorrect because we know in this context it is. Someone who doesn't know the language is very slow at reading that and thinks that every new way that something is organized is a new word. So when you're looking at children, when they're trying to read, as you pointed out, they will look at a word like cat and they will say, k, si, si, k, a, then to, and then they will pause and you're like, get to it. And then they will say cat, maybe, hopefully, if you're lucky, you know. And they do that because it takes them that much of time to process the information, code it together, think through all the, because they don't have all these algorithms, right, which say that actor will be cat for all likelihood, and it's very rarely going to be anything else like Kate or anything of that sort. Maybe it's a spelling mistake. They don't have those kinds of algorithms really, so they will not be able to predict, and they're taking time to patch everything together, decode it, and so they are not predicting, and so they are slower. You're right. But it's also important because that kind of prediction game also leads to a kind of confirmation bias, because you think you know it in a particular way, you don't you don't read it in any other way. Okay. So an example would be your WhatsApp chats. A WhatsApp chat is an interesting exercise. When I'm talking with my cousins, I will use a lot of Tamil and Malayalam words in it. In the middle of English, I will have a word of Tamil in it, which is written in the Roman script. And I won't be able to pass that on to my friends because I'm talking to them in Hindi, or they are using a Marathi word or something, again in the Roman script. And we are already decoding certain words in a particular way. So, for instance, when you write AA in the Roman script, AA can be, oh, I am angry about something. What is happening? Or some exclamation of that sort. But if the other person is a Hindi speaker, AA can be just come. And you have to decode it based on your entire knowledge, experience, understanding what this person comes from, etc. So if you are struggling with your knowledge, you won't be able to do it as fast. You will look at it and say, what is this word? And where does this come from? What does it mean? What is this person trying to say? And then it takes you so much more time to process it, And so those are elements. So with your friends, for instance, when they send messages, even when they mistype it, you are faster at reading and decoding it because you know them and you can predict. If your teacher sends you a message, you perhaps may not be as quick to decode. You'll be like, I don't know what she's trying to say. It's difficult. I don't know her. I don't understand this. So it's very important that we consider how important prediction is for speed reading. Every single time that people say we need to speed read, we have to understand what prediction means for them. And are they good at predicting? So do you have knowledge of the field that you're working in? only then can you speed read. You can't speed read everything. You can be a doctor and you can speed read a lot of, patient reports. You can't be someone who is a patient's relative and speed read all the patient's reports, because it's difficult. You don't know what you're looking for. You don't know where to look for the information that you need. You don't know how to predict the rest of the information based on that one piece that you have decoded. So those are important elements to keep in mind. And that is one of the reasons why we have to go back to writing and then see how we should write into those options. How is it that those options come to be? How is it that we can make it easier for someone to understand us? So figurative language is used because it uses a lot more than the literal meaning, but figurative language expects you to have understood a lot. So when I use the word set, I expect that you know all, the most common meanings of set, at least 28 of them that you would know. There are a lot more meanings for set, but I would expect that you know at least about 10, 12, and you'll be able to use them. So there is an expectation that I have of the reader. If I don't have that expectation, then I should make it very clear by explaining things. So let's go to this figurative language and read this kind of statement. I have eaten so much, I feel as if I could literally burst. Okay? Do you think the person could literally burst, like could actually just burst and, guts and gore is splattered all around? Do you think that could happen?
No.
No.
No. Okay. Now, that's fine to say. Do you think children who are of, say, third standard and fourth standard will be able to understand this? For instance, if you have something which says, मैं इतना भूखा हूं कि मैं घोड़ा खा सकता हूं. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Do you think children will take that literally, or do you think that they will understand that I'm famished?
Young children take it literally.
Right, they do. And so when you are using language, it's very important to understand how is it that children, or how is it that your audience, and by the way, when you say children, it's only because of their experience, right? As a child, the child has not had an experience of understanding and decoding, differentiating between reality, truth, which is reality and truth, a lie, and imagination. So for them, imagination is also truth. So when they say that my best friend is standing next to me and this best friend is like this non-fictional person who does not seem to exist anywhere but in their eyes, they believe imagination. They literally believe that that is truth, because for them, whatever is their truth is everyone's truth for that matter. So it becomes difficult, and it is sometimes important for us to understand when and how to use it. So even for a lay person, when a doctor will make a joke and the patient will say, do you think I'll die? And the doctor says, oh, we are all going to die one day. No doctor who is going to conduct a surgery should be making that kind of a joke. Not to the patient, and not to the patient's relatives. Like, we are all going to die one day. Yes, we know that, but not this time to say it. And so it's a matter of also understanding when to say, whom to say to, how will they receive, etc. So this is the reason why I switched from the bias to here. So now these are the different kinds of figurative language. These are just a few. Everything has not been put on the chart. So you have imagery, you have simile, you have metaphor, alliteration, personification, onomatopoeia, hyperbole, idioms, etc. I'm not going to get into the writing exercise immediately, but I'm going to ask you to think through this. 1 second. Yeah. This is a simile, right? The muscles on his brawny arms are as strong as he is. Or I am as busy as a bee. That's another one. Metaphor is the road was a ribbon wrapped through the desert. Okay, so this is your metaphor. And now my question to you is, which one will you use first, simile or metaphor in children's literature? For, when you have children of under 8, will you use these metaphor or simile? Or will you use both?
I feel quite difficult for
I think
underage.
simile.
Simile is better.
Yes, even I
Among
think
Why
simile,
is simile better? That's a good question, but why is simile better? That's a very good answer.
because I think it is quite simple to compare two things against each other, as
yeah, I
it
too feel
happens
that's
in
a
case of
comparison.
simile.
So when
Since
I
there is a
say he is
comparison,
as fast, yeah, if I say he's as fast as a horse and I say he's a horse, why is it more difficult to say, yeah, can't hear?
In the second one, the student may actually think that you are calling the person a horse while you might just be commenting on their strength. They will not be able to get that.
Right.
Yes, and when you
So,
use as word, so it becomes easier to relate to that sentence as a whole. As fast as a horse, instead of using only horse word.
yeah, so he is a busy bee. Right? Now, of course, one of this is a simile and one of it is a metaphor, but it is so much more difficult, as you pointed out, because he may think that he's a busy bee might mean, or he's a horse might mean that literally there is someone who is a horse, or there's someone who is a busy bee, who is a bee and busy. But so I have to first, he's as busy as a bee. Now, imagine the cognitive load on thinking that is occurring in these kinds of sentences. I have to know that this person is a human, presumably. The other thing is a bee. There are many qualities of a bee. One is that it has wings. Second is that it likes flowers. It can make honey. It has a sting. It typically also happens to be very busy most of the time. And of all the qualities, it's not every quality that is attributed to him. It's only the busyness part. So he is as busy as a bee, is that the bee is a very busy creature and he is as busy as that creature. So I need to know all the qualities of a bee in order to be able to understand the simile. He's a busy bee is even more complicated. I have to understand that he is not like he doesn't sting like a bee, he's not as small as a bee, he's not humming like a bee, he's only as busy as a bee. And these are very important aspects to keep in mind when you're selecting text and you're writing text for others, to say, what is my audience level like? So, one of the assignments that you will have is to identify your audience type and then write the text in that manner. Another is to, a text is given and you have to rewrite it so that it suits another audience type. So I'm just giving you advance warning of the kinds of assignments that you will have. But these are important points to keep in mind. Doesn't mean that we will never ever use figurative language. We will, but we have to be careful about when it is getting used. So editors and publishers and book reviewers actually keep in mind what is the average length. Um, Maybe I won't do this part because we're running out of time. But I have a question for you. Another question before we go back to those types of text that I do want to get back to and very quickly revise. Um, what is the average length of a sentence that is recommended for a good reader, adult reader? What do you think? How many words? How many words can a sentence typically have for an adult reader?
Um, I, I can guess, I think like 8 words. I'm not sure.
Mm,
15, 15 to
yes. Yes.
some
Yeah,
10 to
closer.
something
15.
around that. Yeah.
Yeah. 6 to 10, about 5 to 6 words are actually given for someone who is, say, think about all your school textbooks. Your your third standard textbook, etc., will have about 5 to 6, 7 words in it. A grade 3 reader, a grade 4 reader will have 8 words as an average count. People do this as a reading Fletch scale. You can go to your Microsoft Word, go on the thesaurus, and look up the reading levels by selecting a text in it. Um, an average adult reader is generally the kinds that you have is Shion closer, Hathel closer. It's about 17 words a sentence. This does not mean that every sentence must have 17 words. It merely means that an average good reader will be able to decode that much of information. You do have people like Salman Rushdie who write one sentence for like 1.5 pages or even longer, but it is very difficult to retain that information. All of these are very important aspects to keep in mind while writing. All of these are very important aspects to keep in mind even while reading, because then you will also try and to take up some things like chunking. And I will get into that part the next time. But a very quick question again, I'll go back to this poll that we had, and I am going to look at it. Is apparently there is a winner, and the winner is that you think it is so much easier to um, write the expository or the descriptive one. Why do you think that? Come on, a lot of you actually gave this question, and I made it expire today by 2:30. So 10 of you who responded, great. Why do you think that the expository or the descriptive writing is the easiest? We'll end with this part, and I will have a next part assignment for you.
I think, ma'am, descriptive writing, like explaining something about that, when you have actual experience of those things, you can observe, you can write, you can just note it down, and then you can elaborate with your whatever capacity of language. That's why I think many of them say that expository writing is easiest part. But if we compare it to the other part where we have to do like some story, or like, so somebody has really
Mm-hmm.
the taste of creativity or the imagination power that much, so whether they have to imagine and they have to do. But when you have to explain something, you have to describe something, that time that thing you have experience, or it is just there to experience, and so you can write about that. That is what I think.
So whoever has typed in this no is very interesting. Of reading, writing is more difficult than reading. But yes, you're right. Expository writing is definitely a lot easier, which is why you will find that describe an hour spent at the railway station, talk about your mother, describe your cow. All these kinds of activities are given to the younger kids. You know, it is obviously built in from that time. Children love stories, and children tell a lot of stories, but they never coherently, linearly weave them. So they will say, there was a cat. I like cats. They go, this last time I saw Snowy in my grandmother's place, I go to my grandmother's house every summer vacation. Last time I couldn't go. We get wonderful mangoes. And you're like, so you began with there was a cat. Can we get back to this, please? And you know this, right? I mean, you have worked with young children enough to understand that children just move in those kinds of circles and are unable to weave those coherent stories that they need to. But if you ask them to describe a particular chair or a lollipop or something, they will tell you 5 sentences or 10 sentences, which are very focused on the lollipop or the biscuit or any activity. And those are important aspects to keep in mind for description. So you find the description is easy. Again, however, as you pointed out, description is only easy when you know something about it. If you don't, description is really difficult. Narrative is the second winner, and I expected that. Narrative is easy because मुझे कहानी बतानी है, मेरे पास कहानी है, I can tell a story and I can weave the story in and I'll tell it the way I want. It's fairly simple to do it. And if you look at all the 10 standard papers, you give them 3 different options to write, and they'll always choose either a description or a narration. They rarely choose persuasive writing. No one chose analytical. Why? What does analytical writing mean? What does it mean?
It is more logical, like you put.
Ma'am,
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Yeah?
Analyzing the given situation or scenario and using your logical reasoning and then writing about it.
Yes, to some.
And also to compare and contrast the.
Absolutely. Compare and contrast, cause effect. Why is that? Yeah, it takes a lot of comparison, which means analytical is so freaking difficult because you have to know 2 things now, not one. You have to know 2 things. And now you not only have to know those 2 things, you have to now also understand, just like that metaphor simile problem, you have to also know, I want to only compare these 2 traits, of these 2 objects. I'm not going to compare everything of them. It takes a lot of organization. If you can understand from the simile and metaphor how much of cognitive load there is in a person to have understood what a busy bee is, it is so difficult. There is so much of thought process going on there. I have to know what a bee is. I have to know who he is. I have to know the different qualities of the bee. I have to understand that the bee is known for being busy. I have to understand that there is no other animal that is known to be as busy. It's so much of knowledge I have to think through for that. That's the same thing with analysis. And yeah, I expected a lot of people to not write analytical writing. Argumentative is, some of you did seem to like that, argumentative. So why was actually only one of you has voted for argumentative. So why is argumentative so nice? Whoever has voted. JD. Who is JD? No? So argumentative is not as difficult, but then I have to understand the audience very well to be able to persuade. And it makes me want to understand your level of understanding and build up your knowledge and get you to agree with me. Have you played 20 questions ever?
Yes.
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 So everyone woke up at 20 questions. When you were asking when you have done this with your parents
Yes.
for,
Ma'am.
yeah. Yes. Thank you. So when you are playing with your audience for when you're trying to argue with your parents or your teachers for an extension in assignment, or you're trying to convince your family for something, do you start, and especially with as children, okay, when you were a child, did you start by telling them, Mama, I want extra pocket money? Did you come straight to the point?
Never.
Never.
No.
No.
You kind of play
Yes.
20 questions with your parents, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Built over 2 3 days, but 20 questions. You know that thing, you know, my friend, you like that person, you know, she is going for this party, you know, and you would constantly get them to say yes, 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 for the first few, and then hit them for the extra money, right? It's the entire yes game strategy that is played. Everyone plays it. uh, Anna Hazare played it, you know, political figures play it, actors play it, anyone who wants to get you to agree plays it. You know, we should do something about the lockdown. You're like, yeah, we should be very careful about it. Yeah, corona is a very dangerous disease. Yeah, we should stay in the lockdown. Yeah. And there you have it. You agreed to the lockdown. So you're done. So it's a same kind of yes, yes, yes strategy that is being played. Argumentative requires you to understand how many questions and how many types and what kinds I will have to take you through to get you to say that yes. It's a constant mental chess that you're playing. And so it is quite difficult. It's very intriguing, but it is quite difficult because you're also now mentally sort of playing a strategy game. You know, there is something called the game theory, and you're playing that game theory in the argumentative writing. And so these are aspects to keep in mind, to remember, to think through, and depending on your audience, change the strategies to make them agree with you. And we will do some of these exercises. What we will have is one paragraph, but then you will be told that this is the second kind of audience. Now, for this audience, write it in another manner. So that's the writing assignment that you have. Okay. The reading assignment will be a longer extract where you will be analyzing, etc. So those will be kinds of assignments that we will do. But so far, what I would like you to keep in mind, and what I am going to sort of do with you, is I'm going to upload this. I haven't done all the PowerPoint slides, of course, with you, but I'm going to leave this uploaded on the site. You can come back to it, look at some of these uh, figures of speech. The next class that we have, we are going to be, and I promise I'll make this better by the next time I'm doing this. Okay. We are going to be looking at these elements, sorry. We are going to be looking at these elements of personification and idioms, etc., and try and see how and where they are used in terms of figurative language. What is the cognitive load? The reason I'm doing figures of speech is that each of these figures of speech has a cognitive load on you. For instance, alliteration. Um, it has a cognitive load on us. It is difficult to get through it. And so we look at these elements and say, why would these be difficult? And what does it mean when we try and take this up for writing exercises? Okay. Uh, this class particularly will have no, this session will have no uh, assignment. There is an assignment for the previous one that you have to anyway do. This one is just asking you to reflect and look up and think about figures of speech, think about the types of writing, think about what we have discussed in class. And the next class we come to will have exercises because I was planning it for the second hour. So those exercises of writing will come in the Thursday class. Okay. Is there any doubt? I can clear that up and then I will have to exit. Sorry.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Are you comfortable, and this was something I wanted to ask you, are you comfortable
No, ma'am.
understanding how this is going? Because I know that sometimes, because I tend to move, I have it in my head, but because I tend to move from one to the other, people get confused. So I'll just go back for 1 minute. Just please bear with me for one more minute. And I will tell you where and how the sessions we have done so far relate to your syllabus. So, one is that we are building to some extent a kind of level of literacy, understanding, and effect. Uh, we are thinking of how the prediction, for instance, or figurative speeches have a cognitive load on us in terms of our knowledge and our experience. Um, I am not, as I said, going to focus a lot on module one. I am going to be looking at module two and three. And so when you are looking at the different types of text, I haven't yet done the different types of text with you. I'm looking at specific strategies that we have, the different types of text. Okay, I'm very sorry about this interruptions. Uh, you know, the creative, the personal, and the critical responses to the text, and the metacognitive awareness of the reading processes and the strategies applied. These will be the focus, and by the time you have some understanding, we will get to it. The aspect of, reading comprehension of children with disabilities, I do want you to keep in mind, because we need to understand these elements to focus on it. The reason I have been talking about what does a third standard child do, what does a fourth standard child do, is because one of the syllabuses that you have says very clearly that we need to focus on understanding what the primary level students must have. So what are the kinds of, how is it that we can develop good reading skills and habits in primary level students? What are the activities? What are the strategies? In order to develop the strategies, you need to first understand what is their thought process going to be like. What kind of level of understanding and reading will they come from in order for us to be able to do that? And some elements that I'm doing is from here, where we're looking at what are the kinds of knowledge games that they have for predicting. We will focus on strategies as a summation, towards the end of our sessions. But what I'm trying to get you to do is articulate for yourselves. I am not trying to do that immediately. And how is it that we can get them to comprehend? What is it that they may find difficult to comprehend? In addition to that, the linkage from there to here in writing process is to try and understand the content in terms of intent, audience, and organization 4.1, and writing as a process in terms of the grammar, vocabulary, spelling. So how do we choose certain texts? And then we will go on to looking at these other elements that we have, the description, expansion of ideas, essays, stories, and so on and so forth. So these will be where I'm trying to link it. So I'm constantly going to go back and forth to some extent between reading and writing, because they are connected. And the focus on primary level comes from the fact that that is something your syllabus does talk about, but we can also explore the higher education level status, right? And we will come back based on all of this. Like when you have said that it is cognitively loaded, how does a child with a disability be able to comprehend something? How does dyslexia affect? These are kinds of questions that we will deal with uh, in the forthcoming sessions. Okay, so I hope that linkage of what we're doing from session 2, session 3 is also sitting in your head as to how it connects in the syllabus to some extent with points. All right. Okay. Uh, Thank you all. And I'm very sorry I began 5:10. I mean, almost 10 minutes. I joined in at 2:07. So, yeah, almost 10 minutes late. Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you for bearing with me, and see you on Thursday. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.